Hi guys, welcome back to the second episode of my podcast, Dena Decides. If you're new here, hi, I'm Dena. I'm a singer-songwriter, producer, and this podcast is where I share the thoughts, questions, and little life decisions I've been navigating from creativity, career, to relationships, and the random things that make me think a little deeper. Okay, and this episode is going to be an all-English episode because I read comments, guys. While I was scrolling through the comment section under my first episode, a lot of you guys were like, Dena, can you please stick to one language? And the top comment was like, you got to do an all-English one. So here I am. There you go. Please enjoy. So actually the past 2 months, I was traveling like crazy. I was in Canada working with my mom, and then I was in LA doing songwriting sessions, and then I visited San Francisco, Tokyo, and then now I'm back. And I have thoughts, guys. I do. Especially thoughts from the time that I spent in Canada. All right, so a lot of you guys are probably wondering what I was doing in Canada with my mom. So here's a little bit of a backstory. My mom is an English teacher, and every winter break, we would organize a program where we would bring a group of our students from Taiwan to experience the studying abroad life. And they would be joining local students at the school that we've been partners with for almost 20 years. 20 years, and attend classes with them. And this is my second year doing this with her. She's been doing this for so many years, and every time I go, I just honestly, like, so much respect to my mom. Like, I don't even know how she, like, pulled all of this off, like, nearly 20 years ago. It's just so crazy. And honestly, it's, like, such a grounding experience for me because I'm doing something completely different from what I'm doing, right? Because I'm a singer, I'm a pop star, and I don't know why, like, maybe it runs in the family, but I've always felt the sense of purpose to help people, whoever I encounter, to help them see that they have endless potential, that they're capable of pursuing things they truly dream about. And so education is like huge for me. Like me being able to do what I'm doing right now requires so many right decisions made from the adults that shaped me. And it's not easy. Like watching the teachers in Canada interact with their kids, their curriculum, how they teach their kids, it's so interesting and very, very inspiring to me because I could tell that they truly, truly love their kids. They love their job. You know, it really puts things into perspective for me too, because it reminds me that there's a bigger world out there, one that matters way beyond just my own dreams and ambitions. And I guess, okay, again, it probably runs in the family, but I really care about how we raise children and influence people to live meaningful lives. And to me, that comes down to 3 things. And it's to raise kids that have grit, dreams, and kindness. I feel like if you have these 3 things, you will have a meaningful life. And I think us as adults, we need to take full responsibility to store these 3 factors into our tiny humans. So in today's episode of Dena Decides, I want to share a few stories from my time spent in Canada, and the reflections they led me to about education, culture, and even my own journey growing up. All right, let's get into the first story. So one day at school, a teacher came to talk to us about something that had happened in class. One of our students had made a comment to a classmate who had longer hair, and he said something like, "Oh, you look like a girl." I know. I was screaming inside because I knew it's highly, highly inappropriate to make those kind of comments in the Western world. But if you grew up in Taiwan, this probably doesn't sound like that big of a deal because it's the kind of teasing that happens in elementary school all the time, right? Like boys would joke about each other's haircuts, appearances, and even like body parts. It's pretty common. but it doesn't mean that it's like okay to do that. Like it is still very inappropriate. And obviously people's feelings might get hurt. The student who received the comment, I later learned was a very gentle kid. The teacher later told me that he already tolerated it twice before saying anything. And eventually he quietly went to the teacher and said it hurt his feelings. So when the school came to talk to us, I honestly expected them to be pretty strict about it. Like they were still strict about it. But the first thing the teacher told us not to do was to be too harsh on our students. She said she understood our students had come from halfway across the world. Like they were still adjusting to a new culture, new environment, and people they didn't know. So situations like this can actually be very, very overstimulating for kids, especially when they're, still trying to figure out the social rules in a completely different environment. But of course, the behavior still needed to be addressed. Like the teachers and the principal had told us that they do not tolerate kids commenting about people's appearance or their body parts. The teacher spoke with our student privately, and he was also brought to the principal's office so he could understand why comments about someone's appearance can be harmful. I remember when my mom found out, because I eventually also told my mom. I was debating if I should tell my mom because I don't know how she would react. But she was really calm about it. Like by the way, the student was 7. She called me to call our student back to the dorm, and he was not allowed to go to school the rest of the day. My mom spent the whole day reflecting with him on what had happened, and she encouraged him to draw a little sorry card to the classmate. And it was really cute. So yeah, he still took responsibility for what he said, but the way it was handled was focused more on understanding than punishment. And that moment made me realize something about cultural differences. So, in Taiwan, commenting on someone's appearance happens all the time. My sister still casually tells me that I'm fat sometimes. I know. And just yesterday, I went to an event and then a friend from the industry was like, "Oh, did you lose weight?" It is so common. And a lot of the times those comments aren't meant to be hurtful. Sometimes it's just how people show familiarity or attention. But in North America, there's a much stronger awareness around personal boundaries when it comes to appearance. So if you're traveling or studying there, that's definitely something to keep in mind. And honestly, I think both perspectives have their strengths. One values closeness and openness, right? And the other prioritizes emotional safety. So maybe the best balance is simply learning to be more aware of how our words might affect someone, and also learning to speak up when something actually makes you feel uncomfortable, which is something I want to get better at, setting boundaries. And honestly, every time when I think about it, I just feel like setting boundaries is actually doing both sides a favor. It's like a win-win. You're giving each other the chance to understand one another better and become more thoughtful in the relationship. And isn't that what good human connection is all about? It's beautiful. So, yay to setting boundaries, but okay to not take things too personally. All right, so this story actually leads perfectly to the next story. Are you guys ready? Here we go. I remember there was this one night around 10 p.m. Everything was supposed to be winding down. Kids were getting ready for bed. Some were showering. The house was finally getting really quiet. And then suddenly, the entire house exploded with piercing fire alarm. And when me and Vicky is my assistant, we were still working in the living room, we turn our heads to the side, and there we saw my little niece, Sage, standing right next to the fire alarm, just trembling and completely frozen. And that's when I realized that she had accidentally pulled the fire alarm. And I remember my first instinct, I almost scolded her. okay, what just happened? This is so loud. We need to turn this off, but I don't know how to. But the whole house was already in chaos. Like kids were running around. Some of them were still in the shower. Everyone was so confused and the sound was just so painful because it's super piercing. I literally opened ChatGPT and typed, how do you turn off a fire alarm in Canada? And then that's when I realized that we're doomed. Because apparently, once it's pulled, it automatically alerts the fire department and you can't just turn it off yourself. Like, the system needs the firefighters themselves to come and shut it down. Like, there's no way anyone can shut it down. So, basically, the whole entire fire department people were just going to come. And in my head, I was like, oh no, the school is going to think we're terrible at raising kids. And then I immediately switched to damage control mode. I helped the kids get dressed and warm so we could wait outside. By the way, it was freezing. It was snowing. And then the whole entire firefighter crew came. The truck was there. Firefighters were there. They came into the house, examined it. And it took them a while to figure out how to turn it off. But then something happened that I didn't expect at all. And the school principal showed up in the middle of the night. She's really close friends with my mom. And the first thing she said wasn't, who did this? Or why did this happen? She looked at all of us and said, make sure Sage is okay. Make sure someone is holding her. And then she found my niece by the time my mom was holding her and gently walked her over to the firefighter and showed her how to say sorry to the firefighters. And at that moment, she taught her how to own her mistakes in the most gentle and human way. And I remember after Sage said sorry, I accidentally pulled the fire alarm down. I will not do it again unless it was a real accident. And then the firefighter just smiled and said, it's okay. That's what we're here for. It happens all the time. But jokes aside, that moment really stayed with me. It was such a beautiful example of how you can teach responsibility without shame. And growing up in Taiwan, I think a lot of the times when something like this happens, the first reaction is usually to scold the child, right? To be fair, sometimes kids really do deserve a little scolding. I'm not saying that discipline is bad. But what I found really beautiful in that moment in Canada was how the focus wasn't on blame first. It was on making sure the child felt safe and then gently teaching her how to take responsibility. Mistakes are actually how we learn, right? If we're too afraid of making mistakes, we might also become afraid of trying. And maybe the best way is somewhere in between, or it depends on the situation. If the kid really did something that's intentionally harming others, then that's something that should be taken super strongly, right? But if it's something more innocent, I feel like we all deserve a little bit more compassion. Okay, on to the third story. I will name this story the no food sharing culture story. So I remember one day my niece came back to the dorm from school looking a little bit sad. And she told me that she felt bad because she couldn't share her snacks with her classmates. And at first I didn't understand why. Because if you grew up in Taiwan, sharing food is such a normal thing. Kids bring snacks to school, they exchange them with friends, and during class parties, everyone shares what they brought. It's almost like a way kids make friends. And we packed a bunch of snacks she loves from Taiwan. She was super excited about the idea of sharing with her classmates. But later when we talked to the school, we realized that there's actually a rule against food sharing. And the reason isn't really about being unfriendly. It's mainly about safety. Some kids might have serious allergies, especially to things like nuts, and even a small amount could be dangerous. So schools try to avoid situations where kids exchange food that might contain unknown ingredients. And that's when I realized something interesting about the cultural mindset. No, actually, why did I just do that? I don't know why I just had that weird laugh. Oh my God, guys, it is super late right now, by the way. It's almost 2 a.m. Okay, let's carry on. So, in Taiwan and in many Asian cultures, sharing food is a really important way we show generosity and care. It's almost instinctive. But in Canada, schools emphasize two things a lot more: respecting personal boundaries and protecting food safety. And actually, I noticed something similar when I was doing a lot of sessions in LA. Whenever we have songwriting sessions and lunchtime comes around, everyone usually just eats their own food. People would bring their own lunch, they eat what they brought, and that's kind of it. No one really asks, hey, should we order together, or do you want some of this? It's so not common. And I was a little teeny bit, I wouldn't say culture shock, but I was a little teeny bit not used to it. Because in Taiwan during songwriting sessions, during lunchtime, we would always gather up and be like, what should we eat for lunch? And if we bring snacks, we would just be sharing with other people. Soup, it's very, very intuitive for us. But it's not like that in America. And meanwhile, circling back to sessions in LA, I'm always the one going, hey, do you guys want some? Here, take some. And every time when I share food, people genuinely react wow, this is so nice of you. As if I was the nicest person they have ever met. And I'm just thinking, isn't this normal? But you can really feel how deeply rooted the cultural difference is. They're just really not used to it. And in Taiwan, we often express care through sharing and generosity, especially with food. But in North America, people often express care through respecting personal space and making sure everyone feels safe. Being careful about allergies. And you know what? I think both values are equally important because, first of all, we don't want to die from food allergies, right? And especially in an environment like North America, there's so many different ethnicities and they have different genes. They're used to different foods. So it makes sense that everyone's really allergy sensitive. But sharing food is such a nice gesture. So, yeah, I still love to share my food. And I like to have a little bit of someone else's food too. Okay, I think we need a break. Are you guys feeling like having a break? I feel like we should try out this having a break moment because I need to drink some water. Grab a snack, hit play again. We're still here, my favorite friend. We're back from the break. I hope I didn't scare you, 'cause you're about to become a better person after listening to this episode, hopefully. Okay, we're back. All right, on to the next story. I will name this Learning Through Questions and Not Memorization. Another difference that really stood out to me was the education system itself, especially the way learning happens in programs like the IB and MYP. In systems like this, teachers rarely just give students the answers directly. Instead, they guide students by asking questions that spark curiosity. Students are encouraged to think, explore, and slowly build their own understanding. And the goal isn't just to memorize information for an exam. It's to help students understand the logic so they can apply what they learn in real life. And this actually made me reflect a lot on my own experience growing up in Taiwan. When I was in high school, especially once I got into the more advanced math and physics and the science track, because high school is in Taiwan, when we get to the second year of high school, we need to decide on whether we're going to be focusing on liberal arts or science. And I chose science. I know. I don't know why I did that, but I did. And I just remember math and physics being so impossibly hard for me. I was almost ready to give up. And a lot of the time, it felt like the focus was more on memorizing formulas and getting the correct answer for the test. If you can figure it out quickly, it was just really easy to start feeling like maybe you just weren't good at it. I remember just feeling I had no time to get to the bottom of it, to figure out why we need to solve this problem this way. Like, I literally felt like I did not have enough time to get to the bottom of it because there was just so much material and the next lesson would already be rushing in. And it was just impossible for me. So eventually, I didn't fully give up on math, but I completely gave up on physics. Later in life, sometimes I would help my mom's students who go to the school's high schools program. I sit down with them and look through their textbooks, and that's when I noticed something really different. The way they teach math isn't just, here's the formula, memorize it. Instead, the textbooks guide students step by step through the logic of a problem. They use questions, elimination, and reasoning to help students discover the answer themselves. And what I love about that approach is that it gives students the chance to truly understand the logic behind something instead of just memorizing a method for the exam. And I personally feel like this is how people should be learning. Because like once you understand the logic behind a knowledge, you can actually use it much more flexibly in real life. And sometimes I can't help but wonder, if I had grown up studying in a system like that, maybe I would actually love math today. Or I could be like a mathematician or something, you know? All right, so since now we're talking about the education system, oh my God, it sounds so boring when I said that. But I promise this is very interesting. Okay, the next, which is the last story that I'll be sharing, I'm going to name it, I have not named it yet. We're just going to start, okay? There are a few days where I got to sneak into a philosophy class for the high school students. I was just super curious. So one day I quietly sat in on a grade 12 philosophy class to see what it was like. And the class started with the teacher asking students to write down what their current core values are in life. Let me give you a few examples. So, okay, I'm pulling out my phone right now. I'm going through the photos and then I think I found it. Okay, so students have mentioned something like, when born, our fate is in our own hands. God doesn't exist, but there are godlike people. God is not physical, but is more of a concept. Humanity is evil at its core and chooses to be good. Some even said, there is something after death. Ooh, I love this one. I control my mindset. Okay, all people are entitled to their own personal freedoms as long as it does not infringe on someone else's freedoms. Anyone can learn anything. You're born with personalities. God is real and all-powerful. These are the things that was immediately written down from the students. And before I knew it, the class turned into a debate, like a real debate. Students were challenging each other's ideas, questioning assumptions, building arguments, and the teacher was guiding the conversation the whole entire time. And what impressed me the most was how well the teacher managed the rhythm of the discussion. Everyone was encouraged to speak, and students with completely different opinions were welcomed to share their perspectives. And there wasn't this pressure to arrive at one correct answer. Instead, the focus was really on thinking, questioning, and expressing ideas. And then after I had like a little conversation with the teacher behind the philosophy of having philosophy classes in high school, he mentioned something that really got me thinking. He was like, you know what? At that age, having the space to reflect on deeper questions about society, about values, about who you are is actually incredibly valuable for young people because it pushes them to ask themselves an important question. What actually matters to me? And that question is going to influence everything. Their career choices, their goals, the kind of life they want to build. And it made me think back to my own high school experience. I remember just learning so many subjects and preparing for exams that sometimes there was barely any time to slow down and really think about these kinds of ideas, you know? The only reflection I remember before big exams was by filling out those personality quizzes about what major you should choose. But here, students were actually being encouraged to think deeply and form their own perspectives. And of course, those values might change as they grow older. That's totally normal. My values can still be changed. But having different core values to explore at different stages of life might actually make every phase of growth more meaningful. Because instead of just moving through life automatically, you're constantly reflecting, questioning, and evolving. And I think that kind of thinking is incredibly important, especially in a world where creativity and new ideas matter more than ever. Because creativity doesn't come from memorizing the right answer. It comes from having the courage to explore different possibilities. All right, now is conclusion time. I have successfully shared all of the stories that I prepared for you guys, and now it's time for some conclusion. So after experiencing all these moments, from the way teachers guide students through questions instead of simply giving answers, to how seriously they treat personal boundaries, to watching high school students openly debate philosophy and their own values, I slowly started to notice a deeper pattern behind all of these differences. And the more I observed, the more I realized that the biggest difference between Taiwanese education and Canadian education might come down to one core idea. In Taiwan, education often focuses on teaching students how to belong. From a young age, we learn how to connect with others, how to share, how to be generous, and how to meet the expectations of society. That collective spirit gives our culture a lot of warmth and humanity, and it creates strong relationships and a sense of community that is actually really beautiful. However, sometimes when belonging becomes the priority, people can also become more cautious about standing out. There can be an unspoken pressure to stay within what feels socially acceptable. And in contrast, what I felt in Canada and also what I felt when I was studying abroad in the States was a system designed to respect and nurture the individual. Many of these systems revolve around the idea that every student is an independent individual whose voice and perspective matter. Ever since I was young, I always wanted to become a singer. Like, my dream started when I was 16. So by the time I was in college, I had already started making like a little name for myself. I joined like a bunch of singing competitions. I would either get the first or the second place. I was signed to a label, appeared on television, and I like slowly began to build like a following online. Wow, I sounded very conceiting. But it actually, it really happened. See? The Asian culture in me was like, Dena, you gotta be humble. But like, they were facts. Okay, that's not the point, you guys. The point was, I could feel that not everyone around me was comfortable with that. Some professors didn't really like that I was doing something different, and some older students would talk about it behind my back. And that experience kind of really hit me because I'm naturally a people pleaser, and I care deeply about what other people think of me. And so it caused me so much distress, but looking back now, it's like nothing. Like, girl, you would be going through crazier things in the future. So those are just like super, super minor. But imagine me being at that age, feeling like the world was about to collapse on me. That's like a lot. And it wasn't until after I graduated and went to study in the States for music that I experienced a very different atmosphere. One thing that really struck me was something very simple, and it's the raising your hand culture. I just named that. Whenever a teacher asked, "Does anyone have any questions?" hands would immediately go up everywhere. Students were eager to ask things, and sometimes even students who clearly weren't paying full attention earlier would still confidently ask their questions. And I remember thinking, wow. Because if you imagine the same situation in many classrooms in Taiwan, most students would probably stay quiet. People are often afraid that their question might sound stupid or that someone might judge them. And that was me. I was so scared about what other people would think of me, and I was so scared that people would judge me because low-key, I would be judging other people too. Not gonna lie. But in that classroom, asking questions wasn't embarrassing. It was so normal and I was so encouraged. And that small moment really helped me understand the deeper difference between the two systems. In Taiwan, because we value the group so much, people can sometimes become very aware of how they might be judged. But in many places abroad, the thing that makes you different is often the very thing that makes you interesting. It's not something you hide. It's something people encourage you to explore. And so looking back now, I don't think one system is fully better than the other. Taiwan taught me warmth, generosity, and how to care deeply about the people around me. But my experiences abroad reminded me of something equally important, and that individuality, curiosity, and independent thinking are also incredibly valuable. And maybe the goal isn't choosing between belonging and individuality. Maybe the real goal is learning how to hold both at the same time, to stay connected to others while still having the courage to become fully yourself. Wow. That was such a good conclusion. Good job, Dena. All right, we've finally reached to the very last section of this whole entire episode, and that is Dena Decides. Okay, so if I could go back in time and choose between would I grow up in an Asian education system or a North American one, what would I choose? I think for me, I would choose North America. But the reason is actually very personal, and I think it's very worth sharing. So I realized that my personality is someone who can be quite affected by other people's opinions. I'm pretty sensitive to comments, to judgment, and to the energy in a room. So growing up in an environment where there's a strong pressure to fit in or where people are very aware of what others might think, that kind of environment can sometimes make me shrink a little bit. But in places where individuality is encouraged, where asking questions is normal, where different perspectives are welcomed, and like being different can actually be seen as something interesting, I feel like I can breathe a little more. And at the same time, I also think this is where self-awareness becomes really important because not everyone is like me. For example, my sister is the type of person who genuinely does not give a fuck about what other people think. Like, truly. And my mom is kind of the same. They both grew up in Taiwan and they turned out completely fine. Well, actually, my sister studied abroad too. She was bullied growing up, but she's still a baddie. She is still a baddie. She was not good at studying in Taiwan at all. She's more of a creative. She's actually, I would say she's the ultimate true creator in the family. She's low-key kind of crazy. So she started studying abroad when she was 17 and she went and studied art and really like opened her true potential. Right. Where was I? Let's circle back. So my mom, for example, my mom is a great example. Oh my God. She grew up in Taiwan. She's from the countryside, the east side of Taiwan, by the way, Hualien, and raised by a single mother, eldest daughter, sent all her younger siblings to college, and she now runs her own business. That's truly, truly inspiring. So maybe the real takeaway isn't which system is better. Maybe it's understanding what kind of environment allows you to grow into your best self. And for me personally, I think that environment would probably be North America. All right, everyone. That was today's Dena Decides moment. Okay, I swear, we have come to an end. But before we wrap up today's episode, I want to thank you guys so much for spending time with me and listening to Dena Decides. This one might be a little bit challenging for some of my listeners and my fans out there, but if you are struggling a little bit, make sure you go and watch the YouTube version. There's going to be subtitles, so you will be able to follow and hopefully learn a little bit of English along the way. Ooh, I want to try something new with this podcast. So from now on, feel free to leave any questions you have in the comments about life, creativity, career decisions, relationships, or anything you're curious about. And then in the next episode, towards the end of the show, I'll start answering some of your questions. Or if there is a special guest, like I would also ask that special guest to answer your questions. Right. Okay, yeah. So if there's something you've always wanted to ask, this is your chance. All right. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, a rating wherever you're listening to it. It really helps the podcast reach more people, and it also lets me know what kinds of topics you enjoy hearing about. And of course, you can listen to Dena Decides on all major podcast platforms, and you can also watch the full episode on YouTube channel if you prefer the video. Lastly, a quick mention for those of you who might be interested. My mom runs an English learning cram school in Daegu, Taipei, called Chuck, which offers courses for students from ages 7 to 18. So if you're in the Daegu area looking for English learning opportunities, you can definitely check that out. And for our winter short-term study abroad program, which I think is super interesting, with our partner school in Canada, we welcome students aged 5 to 18 to join us as well. You'll be able to experience what it's like to study and live abroad for a few weeks with me and a very fun assistant, Vicky, and my super cool mom. If you want to learn more, you can also follow Chuck on Instagram. It's Chuck_global_edu. Let me spell out for you guys. It's CHUCK_global. GLOBAL_EDU. There will be updates and information about all our programs. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, please. Thank you. And subscribe to my YouTube. Thank you. All right, guys, that is it for today's episode. I need to sleep. It's very, very late right now. I need to sleep. Thanks for listening to Dena Decides, where I overthink life so you don't have to. Bye.